Shelby and I, we agree on one thing.
The groom's cake.
Imagine a tiny beauty shop in a small Louisiana town, the kind of place where the women come to get their hair done and end up telling each other everything. On screen, it was all warmth and laughter and that easy love between old friends. But behind the cameras, things were a lot harder than anyone let on. One of these women was being worn down so badly by the director that she'd go home and cry almost every single night. Another one sat there, melting under the hot lights for weeks on end and never once complained. And the reason why is going to stay with you. The friendships they built, just to get through it all, turned out to be every bit as real as the ones we watched them play on screen. Some of them are still here, doing the bravest work of their lives. And a few of them we've lost along the way they held on to each other, both back then and in all the years since, is the part that still touches people today. So let's count down 10 of the most surprising journeys from Steel Magnolias, starting with the woman who very nearly got turned away at the front door. Let's start with Daryl Hannah, because she almost didn't make it into this movie at all.
Miss Trudy, I swear to you that my personal tragedy will not interfere with my ability to do good hair.
She played Annelle, the shy, nervous girl who walks into Truvy's salon with nothing but a suitcase and a secret she's too scared to share, and we loved watching her slowly come out of her shell. But the truth is, the director didn't even want her, because he took one look at Daryl and decided she was far too pretty to ever pass for someone that plain. So she came up with a plan. Before she showed up to read for the part, she turned herself completely into Annelle, with her hair flattened down and not a trace of makeup, and she did it so well that the guards at the studio didn't recognize her and almost wouldn't let her inside. She had to talk her way past the front desk just to get in the room, and once she did, the part was hers on the spot. And here's the thing that makes it hit a little harder. That shyness she played so beautifully wasn't really acting, because when she was a little girl, doctors told her family she should be sent away, and it was only her mother refusing that kept it from happening. Daryl has spoken very openly about how frightening the spotlight always felt for her.
It's always difficult. I couldn't sleep last night. I know it's always difficult. And not because
Which is why where she's ended up feels so right. These days, she lives a quiet, peaceful life out in the Canadian countryside with her husband, the rock legend Neil Young, in a marriage so private that most of the world barely noticed it happened. She's behind the camera now, directing his concert films, living on her own terms. The shy girl who once hid from the world finally decided it was time to speak up for herself. And it turns out she wasn't the only one on that set quietly falling in love. Dylan McDermott. That someone was the young man playing her husband, Dylan McDermott. He was Jackson, the gentle, devoted husband who stays right by Shelby's side through the hardest parts of the story, and you trusted him the second he smiled. As it happens, some of that tenderness might have been real, because according to reports from back then, Dylan and Julia Roberts quietly started seeing each other somewhere in the middle of that long, hot summer of filming. Neither of them has ever really talked about it, so it stays one of those soft Hollywood mysteries. But hold on to that thought, because where it all ended up is one of the nicer surprises in this story. What we do know is that Dylan brought real pain into this role. He lost his mother when he was just a little boy and was mostly raised by his grandmother, and acting slowly became the place where he could put all of those feelings. And it worked, because after this film, he became the leading man on a huge show called The Practice, and even won a Golden Globe. Then he did something nobody saw coming. He spent years playing villains, the smooth and unsettling kind you can't quite look away from, and he got so good at it that people almost forgot he'd ever been the sweet Southern husband in a tearjerker. So in 2026, he's come full circle. At 64, he's leading the popular show FBI, Most Wanted. Back on the side of the good guys, and the way he tells it, he figured it was finally time to play someone good again, because he'd stayed at the bad guy party just a little too long. He may have been one of the youngest faces in that cast, though, because the next man we're talking about is 92 now, and what he looks like today made the whole internet stop and stare. That next man is Tom Skerritt, and I have to start with how he's doing right now, because it's amazing. But first, his role. He played Drum, Malin's grumpy husband, the dad who spends the morning of his daughter's wedding shooting blanks up into the trees to scare the birds away, and it's one of the funniest little moments in the whole film. The best part is that it really happened, because the writer's own father did that same thing before his sister's real wedding, so a true story landed right up there on the screen. By the time this movie came along, Skerritt was already a Hollywood legend, and on a set full of tension between the director and all those powerful women, he made a really classy choice. He stayed quiet and grounded and let the women own every scene, because he didn't need the spotlight. He just made everyone around him better. And now for the part I promised. In 2026, Tom Skerritt is 90 92 years old. And earlier this year, a short clip of him at a fan event spread all over the internet because nobody could believe how sharp and warm and full of life he still looked. People started calling him a national treasure, and watching him, it's hard to argue. What's lovely is that he never really slowed down. Instead of disappearing into retirement, he's been pouring his time into the things he loves most, like documentary films about America's rivers, which feels like a gentle echo of one of his most beloved roles. He's still creating, still curious, still showing up. And that's the surprising thing about this cast, because there's one more man who slipped quietly into the background on screen, and you've absolutely seen his face somewhere, even if his name doesn't ring a bell just yet. His name is Kevin J. O'Connor, and I promise that the moment I tell you one of his other roles, it's all going to click. In this film, he played Sammy, the goofy, sweet bartender who falls head over heels for shy little Annelle and ends up marrying her. And he's the one who never quite fits in with the polished Southern crowd, which is exactly why you root for him. Here's something you might not know about how he built that character. The director kept a really tight grip on everybody's lines, but he let Kevin do his own thing with all that lanky, awkward, lovable body language, and a lot of those little mutters and reactions were just him making it up on the spot. It gave the movie something light and warm to hold on to right in the middle of all the heavier moments. And now here's the part I promised, because you know that huge adventure movie, The Mummy. Kevin is Benny in it, the sneaky, gold-grabbing little weasel who somehow steals every scene he's in. And once you make that connection, you will never be able to unsee it. He turned up in Van Helsing too and gave a haunting performance in There Will Be Blood, one of the most respected films of the last 20 years. The thing is, he never chased the big leading man kind of fame. He just quietly became one of the most dependable character actors in the business, the kind directors call back again and again. And in 2026, a whole new wave of younger fans has rediscovered his work online, and he recently sat down for a rare, honest interview about his long career. No big ego, no chasing the spotlight, just a man who outlasted all the trends and stayed exactly himself. So that's the men of this story, and now it's the women's turn, starting with the one who had the sharpest tongue in town, and as it turns out, one of the softest hearts behind the scenes. That sharp tongue belonged to Shirley MacLaine, who gave us probably the most quoted character in the whole movie. She played Weiser, the rich, cranky, permanently grumpy neighbor who growls that famous line about how she isn't crazy. She's just been in a bad mood for 40 years. We laughed at her the whole way through, but we could also feel how much she secretly loved these women, and that mix is what turned a grouch into everybody's favorite. But off camera, Shirley was the complete opposite of grumpy, because she was the one quietly looking after everybody else. That young actress who kept crying almost every night, well, all of that was happening inside Shirley's living room, because she opened up the house she was renting and made it a safe place for the others to land. She didn't like how the director was treating the youngest one in the group, so she watched over her like family. And here's a small detail that tells you everything about this cast. These women stayed close friends for the rest of their lives, real and loyal and true. But when it came to the director who'd pushed them so hard, Shirley has said it plainly that when he passed away years later, not a single one of them showed up to the funeral. That's not them being bitter. That's a group of women who knew exactly who they loved. As for Shirley's own life, it went somewhere wonderfully unexpected. She became one of Hollywood's most fearless voices on spirituality and the great mysteries of the universe, writing one best-selling book after another. And in 2026, she's past 90 and still completely sharp. Still funny, still totally herself, with a beautiful new photo memoir looking back on 70 years in this business. The woman who played the grumpiest soul in town somehow became the one most at peace with whatever comes next. And that dear friend she traded all those insults with on screen has a story that might be the most quietly inspiring one of them all. That friend was Olympia Dukakis, and her story is living proof that your biggest moment can show up whenever it feels like it. She played Clary, the elegant, gossip-loving widow with all the best one-liners, the one who says the only thing separating us from the animals is our ability to accessorize. And then she gives us that unforgettable moment in the cemetery, shoving her friend forward and telling a grieving Malin to go ahead and hit her instead, showing in just a few seconds how laughter and heartbreak can sit right next to each other. That is a very hard thing to pull off, but here's the part that really gets me. Olympia was no overnight success. She spent decade after decade as a hardworking stage actress and teacher, mostly unknown to the wider world, just doing the work and waiting for her turn. And then, right before this movie, it finally came, because she won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress at 56 years old.
And the winner is
Olympia Dukakis in Moonstruck.
Well, I'm very honored. I want to thank the members of the Academy.
After 30 long years of grinding away, the whole world finally got to see what she could do. And she made every bit of it count, taking on bold, big-hearted roles after that, including one much-loved character she played across many years who became a hero to people who had almost never seen themselves on screen before. Everyone who worked with her says the very same thing, that she was warm and generous and completely real. Olympia passed away in 2021 at the age of 89, but her legacy only keeps growing. People remember her now not as a supporting player, but as a true giant. The proof that you don't have to fit some narrow little mold to be unforgettable, and that your finest chapter can arrive long after everyone assumed your story was over. The whole cast adored her, which makes this the perfect moment to turn to the woman right at the emotional heart of this film, because she recently admitted just how much one single scene took out of her. That woman is Sally Field, the beating heart of the whole movie. She played Malin, the mother doing everything she possibly can to hold her family together through the unthinkable. And that scene in the cemetery, where she finally breaks down and all her grief comes pouring out as pure anger, is still one of the most powerful things ever put on film. All these years later, people still can't get through it without crying. And here's something Sally shared just recently that really stayed with me. That scene didn't only look devastating, it actually took something real out of her, and she said it cost her a little piece of her soul. The whole cast held hands while they filmed it because there's simply no way to fake pain like that, and going to that place together is part of what bonded them for life. And Sally never once let Hollywood make her smaller as the years went by, because she kept choosing roles that meant something. In 2026, she's leading a tender new Netflix film about a lonely widow who strikes up the most unlikely friendship, this time with a wonderfully wise octopus, in a story all about grief and connection and finding family in the last place you'd ever expect. And the sweetest part is that it was made by a company her own son helped build. The woman who taught us all how to grieve up on that screen is still out there chasing stories with real heart. And that young actress she protected so fiercely all those years ago, well, it's finally time to tell her story. Because of course that actress was Julia Roberts. She played Shelby, glowing and stubborn and so full of life. A woman determined to live every moment fully no matter what it might cost her. Her character was inspired by a real woman, the writer's own sister, whose story carried a very personal weight of love and loss. And that real emotion is exactly why the whole film hits as hard as it does. And Julia, barely 20 years old and almost completely unknown back then, carried all of it on her shoulders, which earned her a first Academy Award nomination and lit the fuse on one of the biggest careers in movie history. But all that sunshine she gave Shelby was hiding something painful, because this was the young actress who kept ending up in tears in Shirley MacLaine's living room. The director went after her hard, over and over, until she turned to the older women at night and asked if she was terrible, if she even belonged there. And so they circled around her like a shield. Years later, when that same director took yet another public swipe at her, Julia, by then a worldwide superstar, finally fired right back, and she had more than earned the right. And that quiet romance I asked you to hold on to earlier, this is where it lands. The reports from the time point to Julia and Dylan McDermott, her on-screen husband, growing close during that very shoot. It didn't survive once her fame exploded, but for one summer at least, the marriage we watched up on screen had a small, real echo in their actual lives. In 2026, Julia is doing the very thing those legends once did for her, because now she's the steady center that other actors lean on. She just took on a bold, much talked about dramatic role in a big new film, reminding everybody that the terrified 20-year-old grew into one of the finest actors of her whole generation. But while she was rising to the top, the quiet man who played Truvy's husband was living a story that might just be the most moving one in this entire countdown. That quiet man was Sam Shepard, and this is the one that always gets to me. He played Spud, Truvy's tired, mostly silent husband, the guy who's half asleep in front of the television. It's a tiny part, but if you watch his eyes, there's a whole lifetime of regret and tenderness sitting in there, especially in that little moment when he tells his wife she looks real nice. Some actors need a full page of dialogue to move you, and Sam could do it with a single look. And here's what almost nobody on that set ever forgot. This quiet man in the background was, away from the cameras, one of the most celebrated writers in all of America. A Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright, the kind of artist other writers were genuinely in awe of. He took this tiny part for the simplest reason, that he loved the cast and just wanted to be around them. And then he set his ego down at the door and let everyone else shine. From someone that accomplished, that's a really rare and beautiful kind of humility. But it's the last chapter of his life that truly stays with you. In his final years, Sam faced a serious illness that he kept very private, and as it slowly became harder for him to write the way he always had, he simply refused to stop. When he couldn't type anymore, he wrote by hand, and when even that got too difficult, he started dictating, while his dear friend, the great musician Patti Smith, sat right beside him and helped him shape one last book, a man still pouring out a story even as his own body was slipping away. Sam Shepard passed away in 2017 at 73, with his family all around him. Patti Smith later wrote that while they were working on a passage about the Western land he loved so much, he looked up and quietly told her he was sorry he couldn't take her there. The thing is, by then he already had, and the woman who played his wife in that little salon is the one whose story today has fans everywhere holding their breath. And so we come to Dolly Parton, because really, who else could it be? She played Truvy, the big-haired, even bigger-hearted owner of the salon, the woman who gives us that line that sums up the whole movie, about how laughter through tears is her favorite emotion. She was the warm, glowing center of all of it, and she always said Truvy wasn't really a character at all, that she was pretty much just playing herself. Here's the little story that tells you exactly who Dolly is. That Louisiana summer was brutally, miserably hot, and the cast was bundled up in heavy clothes, wilting under the lights, and most of them, understandably, complained about it. But not Dolly. She sat there in a tight costume and sky-high heels and a heavy wig, cool as could be, and never once griped about a thing. And when somebody finally asked her how on earth she did it, she told them that when she was young, she'd had nothing at all. And back then, she used to dream of being exactly where she was right now. So she wasn't about to start complaining about any of it. And when the director told her, right to her face, that she couldn't act, she didn't even flinch. She just smiled and told him she wasn't an actress. She was Dolly Parton, and it was his job to make her look like she was acting. That right there is steel wrapped in rhinestones. But 2026 has brought her one of the hardest seasons of her whole life. In 2025, she lost Carl Dean, her husband of nearly 60 years and the great quiet love of her life. And in the months that followed, she stepped back from the stage, admitting she'd been worn down and worn out by grief and a few quiet health challenges of her own. A lot of fans got worried, but this past spring, standing on a stage at her very own park, she looked out at everyone with that same familiar warmth and told them she was healing in her body and her heart and her spirit, and that everything was good and none of it had stopped her. She even joked through a few tears that Carl was up there waiting for her at the pearly gates. Worn down maybe, but not broken, not even close. Still standing, still glowing, still Dolly. All these years later, here's what really stays with you about Steel Magnolias. This cast ended up living out the very lesson the movie was trying to teach, that the people who look the most delicate are usually the ones made of pure steel. A frightened young actress became Hollywood royalty because a few older women decided to look after her. A quiet writer faced the very end with incredible courage, telling one last story right down to the finish. And a woman who refused to complain through all that heat is still, all these years later, refusing to let grief have the final say. These weren't just performances, they were real people living through real chapters of love and loss and quiet bravery, holding each other up the way real family always does. And maybe that's the whole point, that the stories we fall in love with on screen so often come from people who are living their own powerful stories the entire time. So if these Steel Magnolias stories made you smile or brought back a moment you love from the movie, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for more classic film journeys just like this one.